She bought a red brick house with white columns on the porch in Chicago, right in the middle of the slums. Then Jane and her friend Ellen Starr got to work with paintbrushes and rags and cleaned up the house. It had been built by a Mr. Hull, so they named it Hull House. All the neighbors were curious. Why would anyone live in the slums if they didn't have to? Chicago's slums were dirty and full of crime, but Addams didn't want to be an outsider. If she was to help people, she needed to know them. She needed to be a neighbor. Jane Addams turned Hull House into a place where people could learn to speak English, get care for their children, take painting lessons, go to a concert, exercise in a gym, or act on a stage. It was a place where they could get together with friends and take pride in their heritage. There were German nights at Hull House when German newcomers sang and danced and put on costumes from the old country. There were Polish nights and Italian nights and Russian nights. Up here we have a picture, and its caption says, Hull House offered painting lessons, as well as English classes and many other activities. Hull House was one of a growing number of settlement houses in American cities. It was so successful that it grew until there were 13 buildings and a staff of 65. About 50 people lived at Hull House. Some of them were writers or artists. Some were homeless. At dinner time, the dining rooms might be filled with neighbors and political leaders, and renowned philosophers. Addams started clubs so that working boys and girls could have fun and learn too. She worked to get child labor laws passed to make it illegal for children to work long days. Chicago built its first public playground because of her efforts. She served on the Chicago School Board and got new schools built. When children committed crimes in the 19th century, they were treated like adults. Few people understood that children's problems are different from grown-ups. Jane Addams understood. She helped establish the first juvenile court in the United States. The Hull House neighborhood was full of garbage. Garbage stinks and brings rats. What did Addams do about it? She got herself appointed a city garbage inspector. Then she got up every morning at 6 a.m. on a garbage truck, making sure the streets were clean. Well-to-do, gilded-age women were expected to stay at home. Addams was breaking society's rules. That took courage. And before we move on to the next page, we have a picture up here, and its caption says, The Hull House was one of a growing number of settlement houses in American cities. And then down here we have a box, and it says, Settling Down. Some Smith College graduates met in New York in 1887. They wanted to do something concrete to solve social problems. They established the college settlement in a New York tenement district. They didn't yet know about Jane Addams in Chicago. Stanton Coit, an Amherst graduate who earned a Ph.D. at the University of Berlin, decided to use his training to help others. He came home and opened the Neighborhood Guild on New York's Lower East Side, and later, with Lillian Wilde, founded the Henry Street Settlement in New York. By 1910, there were about 400 settlement houses in cities across the country. So, moving on to the next page, she had plenty of it. She also had intelligence and energy. Maybe that's why she attracted so many thinking people to Hull House. A historian has written that the Hull House community was perhaps the most formidable group of intellectuals and social activists gathered in this country since Jefferson's dinners at the White House. Addams learned that reformers need to get involved in politics. That wasn't easy. After all, women couldn't vote or hold office. Still, she became active in presidential campaigns and in a world peace movement. In 1931, when she was 71, Jane Addams was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, the first American woman to be so honored. Over here we have a picture, and this caption says, At Hull House, Jane Addams learned of the struggle for existence, which is so much harsher among people near the edge of pauperism. And down here we have a box, and it says, Problems of Progress. Thomas Jefferson had talked of America as a place where citizens are supposed to pursue happiness. But at the end of the 19th century, life for some Americans wasn't very happy, and often it wasn't their fault. The Industrial Revolution and the new capitalism had created a new kind of world, a wonderful world of new products and new opportunities. But no one was prepared for the misery and imbalance it also created. Mark Twain, the muckrakers, and others called attention to the imbalance created by the machine age and the unplanned growth of cities. Urban poverty was breeding crime and waste, along with a sense of unfairness. But the problems of poverty and injustice didn't get solved. They would haunt the 20th century. In the 21st century, there would still be Americans going hungry. And over here we have a picture, and the caption says, "A child rummages through a trash bin," a stark image of the persistence of urban poverty. Politically speaking, what is a direct primary? Candidates for political offices were nominated at party conventions, and those conventions were often controlled by party bosses. Now, if the candidates could be chosen by the people in party elections before the main elections, you'd have direct primaries, and a more democratic process. In 1896, South Carolina adopted the first statewide primary. After that, the movement spread quickly to most other states. Initiatives and referendums. South Dakota was the first state in 1898 to try the initiative and referendum. That fancy-sounding phrase means that voters get a chance to vote on some laws themselves, instead of leaving everything up to their legislators. If a specific number of voters petitioned to have a measure put on the ballot, the initiative, then voters could vote for or against it, the referendum. It was democracy expanding again. Can you think of good reasons why some people were against this idea? Amendment 17. Article 1, Section 23 of the Constitution says, "The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature thereof for 6 years." Chosen by the legislature thereof was a process that bothered many Americans. They wanted to choose their own senators directly. It would be more democratic, but the Constitution would have to be amended. The House of Representatives voted for such an amendment. Beginning in 1894, they voted for it 3 times. Each time, the Senate defeated the measure. The senators liked the way they'd been chosen, but most Americans didn't. Finally, on the 4th try, the Senate agreed. In 1913, the 17th Amendment was ratified by the states. It says, "The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, elected by the people thereof for 6 years." Down here we have a picture, and its caption says, "The first American use of the secret ballot occurred in Boston in an election held on November 5th, 1889. So that was chapter 39. I hope you all have a great day.